think we probably all like to cheat winter a little bit. I mean, I've got a nice bunch of camellias on my table here. I picked them last weekend, so they've been indoors here for a week. And I picked them while they're just showing pink in bud. And then you bring them into a warm room and you watch them open. Photographs in this article, and I've got it here before me. I mean, that is the cover, and that is a little bit of East Ruston there that you can see. That particular photograph has never been taken from that angle before. And I looked at it and I thought, oh gosh, that looks familiar. Well, of course it is your fault, it's your garden, you know.
Hello and welcome to episode 115 of Talking Dirty, over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking absolutely fabulous, despite the fact that he spent the last half an hour running around his house trying to find a location where the internet works. We have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
Well, thank you very much for that warm introduction. I mean, it's been a crazy morning, hasn't it? You're absolutely right. It's exactly half an hour spent running hither and yon. But here we are now. I think we've found a little spot where the internet is somewhat stable. You are looking blooming and absolutely wonderful, Thordis. I have to say, Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson, you always do. But I love your jumper. And there's something very clever about the way you coordinate things, because behind you there's a painting. It's got exactly the same colours in the painting as you've got in your jumper. Or is that your favourite palette, I wonder?
Well, I think that might be it. But this painting, I'd love to say it's some top painter. Obviously, it doesn't look like it is.
Don't tell us it's too much information. I need to know that it's priceless.
It is. Well, it is priceless because my partner and I did it on a rainy day. We just got some paints out and mucked about, and that was the end result. Anyway, less of that.
It looks to me a little bit as if you were carried away with something else. Anyway, never mind. As you say, enough of that, dear.
We have the most generous-spirited, lovely, calm, laid-back guest today who we've just been chatting away while we've sorted out our technical problems. Anya Lautenbach of the Money Saving Gardener book and YouTube channel. Also, Anya the Garden Fairy, which means there are two fairies on this podcast, the Thunder Fairy and the Garden Fairy. And we are delighted to have you on the podcast to talk about not only your new book, but your fabulous garden that you've created mostly by propagation. Before we get into all of that, do you have a middle name alongside your other beautiful names?
I do. So first of all, thank you so much, guys. I enjoyed the house tour, Alan's house tour, and I love how colorful you are. I'm always wearing black because I see myself a bit like in the background of all the beautiful flowers that I grow. So I do have a middle name. My middle name is Monica. So it's Anya Monica Lautenbach, and very well pronounced, you two.
We tried. We've been practicing. I love the fact that you wear black to be a foil. My partner is absolutely determined to never really wear colours, and he always says that he's my foil. So I like that you're doing that with your plants.
Do you know, I see myself a bit like a magician. You know, because I do loads of propagation. So it's a little bit like a bit of magic, dressed in a magician costume.
And the propagation thing is very much the heart of what you've been doing on social media, and obviously the inspiration behind your book, which has so many tips in it to help any level of gardener, but I suppose particularly new gardeners realise what they can achieve by growing from seed, by taking cuttings, by layering, all of these methods that you cover, some of which are really very advanced. So how long have you been gardening, and when did your journey, your propagation journey begin?
Well, first of all, I always feel like apologizing to British people for teaching them how to garden because I'm Polish. And as everybody knows, British gardens and British people are the masters of creating amazing gardens and everything that comes with it. But my love to propagation started when I was a little girl. Which is now nearly 35 years ago. And that was back in Poland when I was growing up. My mom was addicted to propagation. We always had windowsills full of cuttings. And I have a very funny story to tell when one of my friend's mom went to a spa, and a very posh, beautiful spa with a glass house. And I came home with pockets full of cuttings. I wouldn't do it now, and I wouldn't recommend to anyone, but I was pretty obsessed.
Actually, Anya, that's very true of a generation or two ago, you know, because people did that and they really felt that they weren't doing any harm if they took the odd little cutting. And I remember my grandmother and my father and mother, when we go and visit houses or gardens or things like that, I mean, there was always a cutting or two that came home in the pocket. So,
Yes,
so it's
yes.
by no means, you know, it's by no means unusual, and it still goes on today.
Yes, I think it's, that's one of the things that I always raise awareness about, because we always think, oh, I just take a little cutting. If everybody would think this way, all the famous gardens would end up as a collection of dry sticks. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. When
Don't.
you think back to your childhood, are there plants you particularly remember having success with? You know, things that you grew and you're really excited about?
Well, I was obsessed about houseplants. As a girl, I think I found all the dahlias and everything else pretty boring. Obviously, this is now a long time ago, but I have a very strong connection to roses. My granny always grew roses. Bear in mind that I come from a completely different background. So my grandparents survived the war and the Second World War. And when they came back, and I feel like I'm the connection to the previous generation, because I lived that kind of their trauma, after the war. So they came back and they grew the most amazing plants. I sometimes wonder, where did they get them from? And they were all propagated, because after the war, there was no garden centers. So roses were very close to my heart because my granny loved them. But I was obsessed about houseplants. Not so much now. I kill them. I neglect houseplants.
Yeah, most of my collection of houseplants are ones that thrive on neglect because I have no time for them anymore. So
They have to.
no, I know where you're coming from on that front. And roses,
Yeah.
obviously, your garden, funnily enough, because you talk about Brits being having this iconic style. I mean, your garden, I feel, captures that style with all of the lavender and the like billowing hedges of lavender and beautiful roses and hydrangeas, their pom-pom heads billowing in the background of your shots. So you've got a lot of those key British garden plants in your plot.
Yes, I was very much influenced by my mother-in-law, who sadly her time came to an end. But I have propagated her garden, and I'm so glad. I did mention in the book, I moved her. She was based in Durham, so she has created the most amazing garden. And there was a time of my life where I really struggled mentally, and that was the reason behind my garden. So she has noticed that I am obviously struggling. I was away from home, facing quite serious challenges, life challenges, and to the point that I truly lost motivation to get up in the morning. And she, seeing this, said, "You must garden. You just must garden." And obviously, what then happened, I went back to my roots. And the roots, even the word roots, has such a deep meaning to me, because I went back to what my mom taught me, what my granny taught me. And I've started seeing propagation as the way of finding myself again, finding purpose in life. And I moved her garden. It was almost like her garden on four wheels from Durham down south, in form of cuttings. Every trip, I was obsessed. I wanted to take as many cuttings as I possibly can to recreate her, to have her in our garden, which I have successfully done.
And that is something that resonates because in the garden here, I've got plants that were given to me by my grandmother and various other relatives and friends and everything else. And I think everybody does. If they've got a good garden, they look at it and they think that plant was given to me by so-and-so. And it keeps memories alive. It's very important, that actually.
Yes, I sometimes feel like horticulture and just, the propagation, even the word propagation, hardly ever used in daily language, sometimes is described dry and scientifically, and people find it just as a science, something complicated. But actually, as we all know, gardeners, plants and propagation bring memories, emotions, tears, happiness, legacy. There's so much close to our soul, to our heart, and not just dry descriptions of processes.
And your book could not be further from dry descriptions of processes. I mean, it's full of lovely pictures, but it's just the absolute the details you need to know, and it makes it really straightforward and really easy for people to understand all kinds of propagation, whether it's taking leaves off succulents, sowing seeds, like I mentioned, layering, all bases covered. And I also think for the beginner gardener that this idea of knowing your plant before you grow it, I spent years, even though I was talking to now Alan every week on the radio, I spent years overlooking that idea of right plant, right place, understanding what a plant wants. So often we see a pretty flower, we want to put it wherever it works in our garden rather than where it wants to grow. And people waste so much money, so much time, they get put off. So all of these key ideas, I think, are in your book to help people get onto that, on gardening the right way, to start their journey in the most successful way possible.
Yes, definitely. And I also think, when we all go to those amazing gardens, and we come home to our own, and we think, well, this is something that I will never achieve. Even when people go to Chelsea Flower Show, or very established garden, not only the show gardens, but established gardens, they think this will take me decades to achieve, and actually is out of my reach because I haven't got enough disposable income. Where I have proven, and I'm sure many people will agree, that that's not the case. That plants, as you say, if planted in the right place, they will thrive. And it doesn't take that long. Initially, when you take cuttings or grow from seeds, obviously things take time. But actually, the process is as enjoyable as the a final goal itself, which is a beautiful garden.
And the sense of achievement, obviously. I mean, Alan can
You
testify.
get, and you do get a great sense. I'm not disagreeing with you, Anna, because I agree wholeheartedly. But there is a but, and the but is that English gardeners, I think especially, are they're hypocritical in a way because they always want to grow the plants they can't grow. For instance, I always wanted to grow the blue poppy. Blue poppies don't like my area
Me
because
too.
it's too dry and too warm. And the other plant that I would like to just say that I do grow quite successfully, which makes me feel quite proud, is Myosotidium hortensia, the Chatham Island forget-me-not. And I remember being at the Chelsea Flower Show, and I said, I was talking to there's a New Zealand garden designer. She had a garden, and we were talking. She very kindly took the time out to talk to me, and I said, oh, she had Chatham Island forget-me-not. She had one on her stand. And I said, I grow that in Norfolk. She said, no, you don't. I said, well, yes, I do. And she said, no, you don't. You can't. It wouldn't grow in Norfolk. And I said, well, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm afraid it does. And I walked away. I just thought, I'm not being told what I grow in my own garden. Thank you very much, madam. But these little things that you grow and you have success with, and you have such thrill about having success with them, sometimes they're a little bit transient. They don't stay because they're not in their ideal environment. And where the Chatham Island forget-me-not grows, it's on the Chatham Islands off the coast of New Zealand, and it's on a very sandy, seaweedy sort of soil, so you can get the kind of thing that it likes, but it's almost impermanent sea mist. You get that fog that rolls in on the coast on a sunny day. We get it here sometimes. We're a mile and a
Yes.
half from the cold North Sea. And at the beginning of summer, you often get the sea mist will roll in, and it's like a cold, wet blanket over the top of you. So that's what Myosotidium, the Chatham Island forget-me-not's like. I don't like that, but I do manage to grow them fairly successfully. And they do occasionally in this garden get a little touch of sea mist. But it's a challenge, and all of horticulture is a challenge. And one thing that you said a little while ago, talking about growing plants from seed and all the rest of it, I remember I was with you, Thordis. We were walking around the garden here. One of my sort of thoughts is that always remember that plants don't want to die, they want to live. And if you give them a fair chance, they will. Thordis and I were walking up the Clematis walk one day, and there's a cosmos that had fallen through the hedge, and it half split the stem. Do you remember this, Thordis?
I do, yeah.
And we looked, and just above where the stem had split, there were adventitious roots coming out of the stem. So that plant was trying to put down roots again to save itself, so it could actually flower, produce seed, and then it doesn't matter because I've done it. I'll die. But you watch those little things, and it's
Oh,
always think that a plant doesn't want to die, especially when you're taking cuttings. But there are tips and knacks to it, and I think you explain this wonderfully well in your book. And I have to say that this book, ladies and gentlemen, I would recommend to anybody who wants to be a successful gardener, because it takes me back to my youth, my grandma, who taught me lots of the things that I know, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Anya, congratulations.
oh, thank you, Alan. That's so sweet. So, so nice. It means a lot to me because it is my first book. And this book means so much on so many levels. I started speaking English 16 years ago. I worked for Mr. Mohammed Al Fayed. So when I came to this country to learn English, I was picked up by one of his bodyguards, and he asked me, "How was your journey?" And I put my head down, and I felt really embarrassed because at that point I already had a degree in German and I was fluent in German, but I couldn't understand what he said. And the first 2 years, I think, was quite humiliating when you don't understand. So writing a book 16 years later, holding this book written by me in English, horticultural book, means a huge amount to me, a huge
It's
amount. And as
astonishing.
you Oh, thank you. But as you said with this plant, how I observe it all the time in the garden, when we underestimate plants, where we think we have to contribute so the plants can succeed. The plants don't need it because they've got that potential in them. And I had a similar situation, which I thought of myself, because I have been underestimated by many people for quite a while. Obviously, if you don't speak the language, people underestimate you. But I obviously had this potential in me. I was able to write a book after 16 years of learning the language. So it's just, I feel really, really grateful that you take the time to talk to me as well.
Well, we're just plantaholics, so Anya, so we'll talk about plants all day long if you let us.
And isn't that it as well? I think
Amazing.
with propagation, you can love plants, but I think there's like a whole extra level of horticultural appreciation when you can start propagating them. And however that might be, if you're really keen on propagation, it's probably every single way you can possibly turn plants into other plants. But you talk about like every way of propagating. How much propagation space do you have, and what's your kind of garden, your Buckinghamshire garden like, Anya?
There's one answer to that.
Um,
Can I just
oh,
butt in and say she doesn't have enough because nobody ever does.
No, that's true.
Absolutely. I always think I want to take over my neighbors' gardens. Well, I was lucky and unlucky in a way. When we arrived here, we didn't have one single plant growing in the garden. The developer who bought the house obviously wasn't a keen gardener and didn't like the plants because they got rid of absolutely everything. So it was a luxury in a way for me because I could fill this garden with all the propagated plants. But you get to the point where you run out of space. That's for sure, especially if you propagate like me. And I'm sure you will understand the greediness. There's always I want more plants. So I've got half an acre only, compared to you, Alan, tiny little garden, half an acre. But we also have a wildflower meadow, and we keep bees. So there's a bit of everything.
And windowsills, I'm assuming as well.
Oh,
Judging from your book, a big believer of popping things into little bits of water and seeing if they'll root.
totally. Just the pleasure from, as you mentioned, I think you develop a different relationship with plants when you propagate them. And there is something that books don't describe, which is the bond that you develop with a plant if you rescue it or if you propagate it. When you see it from birth, when you see the first tiny roots appearing, there must be something else. I truly feel it.
I think the other thing that I feel is that because I've been doing this for such a long time, I grow plants that are not readily available. And so I have to keep propagating them to keep them young, to keep them healthy. And I have a Dianthus called Chomley Ferran. And Chomley Ferran is an old-fashioned mini carnation, if you like, quite tall growing, but small flowers. And the small flowers are randomly split, bright red and mauve. It's a strange combination. It's almost like the flower of the flag of Hong Kong,
Wow.
purple and red. It's very strange, but it's an unstable plant. And I
Mm.
propagate this by cuttings to keep it going. And I've just got, I think, probably about 36 cuttings because, like you, Anna, I'm greedy. You see, you have a plant and you're looking after it, and perhaps it suddenly looks a little bit unhealthy and a little bit, tired or something. And I could see that this plant was on its way out. So I took every cutting I could and I've rooted them and off we go again. But it's unstable in the fact that some of the shoots will have a plain mauve flower and some will produce a plain red flower. So it's a very difficult thing to sell to anybody. I mean, I put plants for sale on our plant stand when the garden's open, and people see it growing in the garden and they want to buy it because it is unusual and you don't see it in very many places. But I have to wait for the cuttings to flower to prove that they are, unstable like their mother, and they haven't got one side or the other. So
Yes.
it is a fascinating thing, and you feel this almost compulsion to propagate the plants because you know that you can't get another one if you lose it.
Absolutely. But do you think it's a bit like, this connects us to the previous generations, because
Yes.
I feel I am like the if you look at it like a chain, my mother-in-law is now gone, but I have all her knowledge. I captured it in the book. I'm also a mom of the new generation. So I'm a kind of between. And, you are the one, by your propagation, you've got this power of keeping something alive, something so precious. And I almost feel like, we need to keep going. We need to keep going and having all those plants.
The other power that we have is to tell the next generation some of these secrets. They're not secrets at all, but some of the ways, the techniques. I think it's important that they know these techniques because I mean, if you take horticulture today, for instance, and the way plants are produced on a mammoth scale, there's nothing as satisfying about it at all. It's purely a commodity. It starts as a seed or cutting at one end, and it goes through this intensive process with force feeding and heating and goodness knows what. And out at the other end pops something like a horrible poinsettia at Christmas time. Claudius will laugh at this, which looks completely unnatural and is unnatural. But it's just purely and simply a commodity. But the plants that we are talking about, the plants that we grow and we love in our gardens, are much, much more meaningful to us and probably to other people. And your book, I think, is a fantastic way of actually getting those people to be interested in as many plants as possible. And when you go I mean, one of the things I always think myself, because like you, I said I am greedy and I am greedy. And if I go to a garden centre and there's a plant that I'm growing in a container that I want to buy, I think, oh, this one looks very good. It's got flowers on it. And then I look at the base of it and I think, but there's not many cuttings. So I'll buy two, and I buy one to put in the garden and the other one to chop up. And I do.
Totally.
Yeah, you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, there's something so, first of all, there's something so satisfying, and I'm pretty sure is related to all those, our brain produces dopamine or whatever from, it's back to the hunters gatherers, when
Yeah. Yep.
cuttings and roots means surviving. And that's
Hmm.
why I realized that looking at roots, it just gives me an enormous sense of accomplishment, satisfaction. You're in control, you're creating life, there's progress. All of those things that we get from, let's say, buying things, but the buying bit is very short-lived, where
Hmm.
propagation has got such a long lifespan when it comes to the positivity that you get from doing it. So absolutely, I discovered this new plant. Well, it's called the night phlox, but it's called Zaluzianskya. I think it's called Zaluzianskya ovata. I think it's very easy for me to pronounce because it's named after Eastern European botanist
Yeah.
Adam Zaluziansky, I think. And this plant is incredible. I know quite a lot of plants, but I didn't know this one variety. And I bought, like you, I bought this plant last year in the garden center, and I propagated. I've got 15 now because I'm so keen on moths. This will feed my moths. So amazing. I'm, feeling great.
The reason it feeds your moths is because it is so swooningly sweetly scented in the evenings and at night. It's a modest little plant. I mean, it's got a small flower, and I think it's white with a touch of red on the edge.
But it's just, I could the feelings I get from there could be one flower, and I only have a tiny greenhouse, but there's one flower. When that one flower opens, the place is filled with this most amazing scent. And because we breed moths and butterflies, I know the butterflies will be just like this will be like a magnet for moths.
Yeah.
But it's the most incredible plant. I feel like giving it a hug.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many plants that you can put in your garden for night flying insects. I mean, Nicotiana, white Nicotiana, anything that's white and lightly coloured, they will seek out, especially if it's scented. So we can encourage all these wonderful species into our garden, species of moths, species of butterflies, and many other insects and invertebrates. I mean, I was having a great fun the other day looking at my log pile. I've got a log pile. It's probably about 15 years old, and the logs have all sort of crumbled away, and they've grown moss, and they've got other plants growing in them. Like there's Japanese anemones in there. And it was getting a little bit overrun by a very vigorous carex. I went in and I edited. So I got out lots of these things, but it's just something simple like 4, 5, 6 logs put together, put some earth in between them, and just watch how it will metamorphosize, it will change, it will grow, it will become its own little environment. It is a fascinating thing. And I mean, we can all have these little things in our garden to help wildlife in general. Taking cuttings and putting new plants into your garden is all about the same thing. It's all encouraging a better life, a better world, a better garden.
Absolutely. I mean, creating habitats, and this is what I mentioned in my book as well. Creating habitats for wildlife is a massive money-saving aspect, because you create so much wildlife that will then long-term help you to create a garden of your dreams. When the garden becomes a battlefield because you want to get rid of slugs and snails, and people often ask me, what do you do with slugs and snails? I said, what do you mean what I do with them? I need them. I need my slugs and snails to feed my birds. But then, I came up with loads of new ideas because of I've got 2 nature boys, and my husband is beekeeper and a botanist, but a beekeeper and a butterfly and moth breeder. So I have learned from them a lot. And I take a torch at night and I walk around. I used to, when the kids were little, not that I wanted, but they wanted it. And I started observing the garden from a different, seeing it from a different angle, almost like a secret life of a garden, because you see things that you never knew exist. And the fact that earthworms feed on grass cuttings and the slugs feed on grass cuttings, you only discover when you take a torch and go at night, and you can use it to your advantage and save money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember I spent a lot of my time when my baby was very small watching videos on YouTube, watching a lot of Charles Dowding, and things like just the big difference of clearing the old leaves away from things like brassicas so that the slugs don't get drawn to those. I mean, obviously they may still eat all your brassicas, but the little sort of things you can do, because you're right, if you go out there and look at night, you'll spot that they're munching away on those sort of decomposing leaves at the bottom of the plant and being enticed in. So yeah, a bit like grass cuttings. And I feel so encouraged when people say they have nature boys. When my little one, I'm sort of hoping that as he grows up, he's out there dragging me out to go and look at moths and slugs in the middle of the evening.
Yes. Oh, it will.
Crossed.
It's amazing. I mean, we're very lucky. We've got I've at the bottom of my garden, we have an area of special scientific interest and outstanding natural beauty. We have one of the rarest butterflies. It actually, in fact, this was the reason why we bought our house. When I say it to people, they can't believe it. So we bought the house because of the purple emperors. So if you know your butterflies, you will know that this is a very, very lucky place. And sometimes we see them. So purple emperors only come down from the top of the oak trees once a year, and we all lie down on the grass and we watch them. And there was one situation, my husband went to the woods and he ran back shouting, Anya, Anya. He shouted, so I thought he saw a dead body. Honestly, I thought I will have to call the police. But I said, what happened? He said, I've seen it. I've seen it. I said, what? He said, purple emperor, purple emperor. So it's incredible how much nature you can attract and how beneficial it is, not only for your garden, also for your health.
That is
friends.
marvelous.
Now, I'm going to ask you something people are always asking me, and it's the most boring question ever, I'm sorry to say, but I want to know your answer to it because mine varies. But it's, what is your favorite plant?
Oh, well, do you know, it's like, as you know, it's like a flavor of the month. This new plant I have mentioned, this Zaluzianskya, I think this at the moment, it's like I'm so intrigued by it, so that is, but it will, if you ask me, as you say, you ask me next week, I will be like, I've seen this plant, it's amazing. It will be something.
We don't have the abundance of flowers that you have in the summer, but you have those jewels. I mean, at the moment for us, it's snowdrops and aconites and all the lovely early flowering things. And the early flowering shrubs, I mean, Daphne bholua, we've got out in the garden. We've got about, I don't know, 25 of them, I suppose, throughout the garden. And the reason I have that many is because I decided that I was going to grow some from seed, which I did. I didn't get very many, about 5, that's all. And also propagate them from cuttings, but they are a devil to propagate. They're very, very difficult. They don't want to root, and it takes a very long time, 2 years before you get a plant that you can use in the garden, which is a long time. And somehow or other, people have stopped micropropping it. They used to do it through micropropagation because that was the easiest way of increasing it. We shall see what happens, but I'm so glad, especially at this time of the year, from January through until April, we have this pervading wonderful scent throughout the garden. And wherever you go, you suddenly get a whiff of it. Or if not that, it's a winter flowering honeysuckle, or it's Sarcococca, and all those kind of, it just makes the winter gardens wonderful. What about that? A wonderful winter.
And Alan, you're very lucky because yours, I'm assuming, didn't get hit hard by last winter. I know lots of people, I think possibly the one at the Cambridge University Botanic Garden, I haven't been this year. I know it got hit hard last year, so hopefully, I don't know if it pulled through. I finally, there's a garden nearby, and you probably have this, Anya, when you go for a walk in your local area, there are certain gardens you always pay attention to. There's a lovely garden. I've walked past it for 4 or 5 years, and I admire it all the time, but it has a fabulous Daphne. My partner always says, why on earth do they have that shrub there? It's right in front of their window. And I say, because it's amazing and it smells glorious at this time of year.
Yes.
Same conversation year in, year out. Finally saw the woman who gardens there and was able to say, I love your garden. It brings me so much joy. And what a fabulous Daphne. And she actually said, oh, it's always suckering. I'm sure I can give you one day. Might be another 4 or 5 years till I see her again. But it was so nice to be able to share how happy her garden makes me and how wonderful her Daphne is.
Oh, isn't that amazing how, gardens and plants connect us? I had a really lovely story, which was actually, I was so pleased that I had this lovely feature in the Daily Telegraph, and the journalist,
Can I just interrupt? I have to say to you, I read that article on Saturday morning. I think it was last Saturday. And I immediately rang Thordis and I said, she's got double-spaced spreading. It's brilliant. It's in the Telegraph. So Thordis said, can you photograph it for me? And so I did, and I hoped she could, but I photographed it and sent it to her so that she could actually read it.
He took literally photos of every little bit so that I could zoom in and read it all.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Well, that was a lovely article, and it really was.
Yes, I was, I messaged her later because she, I'm so new to all of this. And I did not, I did mention to a few people. I was once mentioned in the Daily Telegraph in the past. The mention was the size of a £2 coin. And I drove to the newsagent so fast that I actually killed the pigeon on my way. As I was coming back with this newspaper, I looked on the side of the road. The pigeon was like, we have plenty of pigeons, and I'm very wildlife friendly, but the feathers flew away. So when I went this time, I didn't know. I thought it was another feature, you know. So this was such a big. But she has chosen to mention the story which I shared with her about the roses, and it really was. You know, I get so many messages on Instagram of people. You know, someone said, "Can I come and visit?" And I'm quite careful because, you know, now with over 1 million followers, I've got quite a big following on Facebook. So over 1 million of people, and I guess they all lovely and friendly people, but I wouldn't necessarily want them to suddenly just appearing from behind the bushes. And when people say, "Oh, I would love to meet you," and I think I've seen you somewhere, and I'm like a bit, you know, it can be quite scary. But this lady contacted me and she said, "You know, I pay you whatever you want," which sounded a bit like, "Oh, what do you want me to do then?" She said, "I pay all the money of the world." I'm like, "I'm not taking my clothes off, just by the way." And she said, "Just come to my garden. And if you could propagate this rose, because, you know," and so she told me this whole story about her mom dying, and she said at night, she said, "My husband was asleep, and at night I realized that the house is now sold, and tonight is the only one chance to go and get the roses." So he actually got up, they live in Windsor, and he got up in the middle of the night, drove to that place in Cotswolds, managed to get those roses from her mom's garden, which got sold. Quite an amazing house. And she said, "I've tried, but I failed in the past, and those roses mean so much to me. If you manage to propagate them, this will mean the world to me. Would you come to my garden and do it?" And I said, "Oh God, yeah, I must do it." And at some point I did go, and, you know, I opened the gate, we chatted. It almost felt a bit like some sort of secret date arranged on the internet. You know, I was coming in the back door, not far away from the Windsor Castle, actually, but, you know, so the setting all beautiful. And then I just imagined this, you know, arriving in Windsor. I told my husband the address because I said, if I never come back, just tell all my followers that was the end of Anya. But she was so pleased, and she said, you know, told me that story. We were in tears, both of us. I get quite emotional. You know, that's my ADHD sometimes makes me emotional. So we took the cuttings and I drove with them back home, and I've got them still in that pot, and they all rooted, and the roses actually flowered. And I texted her and I said, "We must do it together. So we must dismantle the pot, you know, get those roses, those precious, precious roses." It was an amazing story. You know, I just thought, because I had moments where I thought maybe I should just stop what I'm doing, but those stories make me, the stories tell me what is my thing to do. You know, I want to do those things. I want to experience those stories.
Yeah, gardening is all about stories. That's something we really believe in on this podcast and as gardeners. I mean, we could probably talk endlessly about all of your all the things you mention in your book. I know that you've got a few favorite plants in the book. I mean, things like straw flowers, which I adore. So I'm here in the Straw Flower Appreciation Society with you. There was also a beautiful little Tiarella I saw you mention, which I think was quite new to
Yeah.
you, called Spring Symphony, which seemed lovely. I was very taken with that.
Yeah, I love the Tiarella. I actually love the name. You know, there's
Yeah.
this. I love names of plants. You know, Tiarella. I can just see this beautiful lady with, you know. The other one is, which I grew from seeds, is Aristolochia. You know,
Yeah.
Aristolochia. Isn't it just? You can see this beautiful lady with this gorgeous dress, Aristolochia.
Would be
I
good
love it.
names
But
for
the
pets, actually. Alan, when you next get some more dogs or something, Tiarella. I mean, great name for a dog.
yeah,
What's your dog called?
gorgeous.
She's called Tiarella. She's known as Ella.
Yeah,
You know, it's
gorgeous, gorgeous.
one of those names like the royal family have when they say it's Prince Henry, but he would be known as Harry. And I could say, well, it's Tiarella, but she is known as Ella.
Yeah. Do you know, I feel almost like, you know, when people show interest in gardening, and, like, you know, people like me, for example, and say, "Oh, I really enjoyed this season. I would like to grow more. Is there anything I need to learn?" And then they get this massive amount of information, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do it." Yeah, simplifying things is my policy. I also wanted to show you my trick with the hellebores, if we
Yes.
have the time.
Yeah, we
Love
definitely
it.
have the time. Yeah, hellebores are
So,
something that I know you're very keen on propagating.
well, I just think that hellebores, we didn't have, when I was growing up in Poland, we didn't, because Poland is so cold. I don't think even hellebores would make it. So when I came to this country, I was fascinated, and I picked some from the garden. And I find them almost like they smile at me at this time of the year. They've got this shy, I call them shy flowers, mainly because I don't know how to describe in English the kind of, when they're facing the ground, you almost have to go on your.
I would say they are demure because they're not flaunting themselves. They're sort of being quiet and hanging
Yes,
their heads.
a
I
bit
like
like
shy.
snowdrops, they just kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
like, oh, and then you have to take your time to actually see the real beauty. And I recommend that people go on their knees and they do it, because when you look at you could just study them for hours and hours. But not many people know, because people, having them as cut flowers, they not the most amazing vase here, but just as an example, people pick them, and as soon as they pick them, the hellebores wilt. And I know a very good trick, and I've got an example here, because I've got a knife, so I'm going to show you how to do it. You basically need to cut the stem. You need to make a very shallow cut from the flower just back to the base of the stem. Two little shallow cuts, and I don't know if you can show it to your viewers, but this will really make it will help them. Just a tiny little, shallow little cut just along the stem, and put it in not hot water, but kind of a lukewarm water, and they will stay for probably about 2 weeks, because otherwise they wilt. So that's a really good thing to know, because hellebores brought into the house bring so much joy.
Yeah.
It really is lovely. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, which is in my book as well, and I managed to get one from the garden. I grow hellebores from seeds. And again, just look at this. Isn't it just amazing when you see a hellebore and the roots and the two little leaves, and this will probably flower following year. I find so much joy in just even looking at this gorgeous little seedling,
I
from my
think
garden.
I think that is absolutely wonderful. And I'd just like to add one little thing, and that is that
Yeah.
hellebore seedlings, if you let your hellebores self-seed in the garden, so the seedlings are one of the first seedlings that you will see popping up early in the year. And if you allow them to make their cotyledons, their seed leaves, and as soon as they get, putting out other leaves, you can gently lift them and pot them individually and grow them on until they're big enough to put where you want them to put. And it's one of the easiest and lovely free crops that you can get from your garden. And it comes at a time of the year when you will have time to look after them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to end your story, so this is exactly a seedling that I have, one of the seedlings that I have found, and I potted them up, and they are fabulous gift that can be given to friends and family. And people sometimes say, well, but they don't come true to type, because obviously they often don't, but they also do. They do come true to type in some cases. But I love that it's, there's a surprise. Sometimes they have tiny little dots. Sometimes they different, they turn out to be different shapes, but that's the whole thing behind propagation, that the surprises and the satisfaction. So yeah,
The joy,
propagate
absolute
hellebores,
joy.
everybody.
The joy of propagation. The other thing we must fit in before we move on to the FLOMO section of the podcast is this fabulous thing. You've got all kinds of little clever ways to bring all season interest to the garden, because you said this thing that creating a garden is a bit like writing a script for a theatre show, and you want the audience to be enchanted for the whole thing, which I thought was a lovely way of describing making your garden entertaining throughout every season. And you created a dogwood display, which was had multiple benefits. One of them was, you're cutting down bits of dogwood anyway to keep them fresh and vibrant. Make a display out of those stems, and then they will hopefully, some of them root, and you'll have cuttings. I mean, that win-win-win. And it looked so lovely in your book.
That was actually.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that was, and I must tell you this very funny story. So I always come up with those ideas, and when the publisher came, the whole team of people standing, there was an assistant, there was the photographer with the camera, and the book designer. That shoot was quite a busy one. And I said, right. They looked at this list that I sent them, and they said, oh, what's this? A dogwood display? Sticks in the, I just described sticks in the pot. So they're like, what sticks? And I said, oh, do you see this, the shrubs in the back in the back of my garden? And they say, yeah. I said, well, so I'm going to put them in a pot and they will look amazing. And I said, okay. They were, and I have actually never done it with this pot. So I said, oh my God, I really hope that this is going to look as I think it will. And so let's all go. So we all walking, they behind me with the camera, the team, the notebook. And as I started putting the dogwood in the pot, they were all, I was amazed as well. The lighting was perfect. So that the light was shining. This dogwood display looked amazing, truly amazing. And all of them went home. And they said, as soon as they left here, they started looking for dogwood to plant in their garden. And then when they came, obviously the dogwood rooted. And I said, and now at the end of the project, we have 3 plants, all, basically use the waste. And I think when I look at this project, I think that was pretty genius.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
It's even better now I know the whole story.
I've done that in pots. I used to make pots for Christmas to put on the doorstep, a welcoming pot, if you like. And we probably put something like a rooted holly in the middle, and we put dogwood around the edge, and I put ivy in as well, which I cut from existing plants in the garden. You just push them in, and providing you look after them, 90% of them, by the time it got to April the following year, they had rooted. So
totally.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's just so. Why don't we do more of this? It's so easy.
Win-win-win.
Absolutely. I operate on like ticking boxes thing. So how many boxes can certain things tick when every step, whatever I do, good for the environment, good for the future, good for your pockets because you don't waste any money. And actually there's a lot of bedding plants that are pretty hideous. So instead, sorry bedding plants, but sometimes people bring all this hideous stuff in and they pay for it, where this is all free. And as Alan said, all in your garden. Just put it in your pots and that's it.
Yeah. I've got so many ideas from chatting to you, from reading your book. Flomo section of the podcast, I suppose we sort of touched on with the Tiarella Spring Symphony, because I saw that on your book and thought, oh, I don't have that. Maybe I should have that. Flomo being a fear of missing out we get about a flower or a plant. And aside from that, I've got a lot of FOMO at the moment because I'm trying very hard not to buy things. I did have a bit of a Dahlia slippage, but that was largely replacing things that I lost last winter, and I might hopefully actually have the time to grow this coming season. But while I was looking through all of the wonderful things that you could buy, possibly bare root, I saw a plant that I hope Alan has or is going to get, and it is the Hosta. Oh, I think my baby agrees, if you can hear him wailing in the background. The Hosta Wu-La-La, which is a sport of the Empress Wu. Now, I have to dig out a photo of Alan with his 2 glorious and very large empresses, one either side in a pot, and him for scale to show how big they are. And is a lovely kind of glaucous-y, massive leaved hosta. Well, there's a sport of Empress Wu which has got that bluish green leaf, but with a sort of flash of lime green around the edge, a bit of variegation, and it looked fabulous. But also the Empress will always have a place in my heart because of her role at East Ruston Old Vicarage, so I thought it would be nice to have Wu-La-La as well. Do you have it, Alan?
I think that's one of the cleverest names, because names, there are names that you remember and there are names that you instantly forget. And I don't think you'd ever forget Wu-La-La.
I love it.
I know. I love it.
Me too.
Such a good name. Do you have it yet, Alan?
No, I don't. But I mean, I shall by lunchtime.
Anya, where are you at with your Flomo? Are there always things that you want to add to your garden?
Yes, there was one. Do you know? It was one dahlia that I actually bought, but I lost it. And again, as Alan, trying to keep it alive, and then I collected the seeds. I grew from seeds. They all turned out yellow, so not the dahlia. It was a dahlia called a new dahlia in the UK, I think. It's called the Night Silence.
Oh, yes.
And I had it.
I bought it.
It's. Oh, did you?
It
Yeah.
was on my list of naughty dahlias.
Yeah, so that's that. I mean, dahlias can be, I've noticed it, like roses. People love dahlias but dahlias are amazing. Some dahlias are amazing. So this Night Silence, which I sadly lost, and the other one, believe it or not, I don't have a jasmine in my garden, so I actually just bought it. So just so people know, I do buy, and I also like to support. I need to mention as well that I do want to support all the growers, all the garden centers. So I do tell people, go and buy what you need to buy, because they need us as well. I'm pretty self-sufficient, but jasmine is the common jasmine. I just bought it. Actually, I'm going to propagate.
I bet.
Well, no, you just hit something on the head there, because I've got various jasmines that I grow in the garden here, and I've forgotten the name of it now. Dear, oh dear. But there's one particular jasmine that comes from India, and it must be grown under glass, and I do grow it. It's not hugely floriferous, but these lovely little cream trumpets it produces in summer and autumn, and it's absolutely terrific. And I always do it. I do my cuttings in cell trays, and I always do a tray of 12, because I know that I'm going to be asked for at least 10 of those plants throughout the season. And it's just lovely to have them to pass them on to other people. I haven't got a Flomo this week. I've got something that I think pertains to Anya, really, because it's a plant called the pickerback plant, and it's something called Tolmiea menziesii. Now, it looks a bit like a Tiarella. Tiarella! So it looks like Ella, but it has, in the middle of the leaf, it has a little rosette, which you can make a new plant from. It also produces runners, and there's a little new plant at the end. Now, when I was a child, my grandmother grew this plant, but it was on a windowsill, because it wouldn't have survived the winters we had then outside. And I bought one of these, well, 4 or 5 years ago, and I planted it in a woodland area. And I've been asked about it throughout the summer. So late last autumn, I did a tray of cuttings of that. And I'm so glad I did, because we had some quite sharp frost here in the garden. I hope it will survive, but if it doesn't, I've got another one. So it's the pickerback plant, Tolmiea menziesii. And it's just a lovely little plant. It's not shockingly vibrant. It's what you call a good background plant, that it's there. You don't necessarily see it. It won't draw attention to itself. But if you look carefully, you'll see that it's more important than perhaps you realize.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's also just made me think that we started this off talking about how you wear clothes to be a foil to your plants, but you are so colourful in every way that it's almost like your clothes are a foil to you and your vibrance. It has been such a wonderful opportunity to sit down and talk to you, not just about your book, but your past, your garden, which you obviously love so much. And I really hope, I mean, you basically, I think we're allowed to say, you kind of had to push the launch of your book back because it's been in such demand. So I'm sure it's going to be a massive seller, and hopefully just get loads and loads more people trying and succeeding with propagation.
And she might always wear black, but she has, what is your signature standout thing? Can you name it?
I don't know.
I tell you what it is. It's your bracelets.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I thought you were going to say a smile.
Yes, you see, I noticed those throughout the book. And I was looking at the pictures in your book, and I noticed every time there's this sudden vibrant pop of color as you put your hand towards a plant, or you're making a cutting, or you're doing whatever you're doing. And I just thought, that's quite clever. Magician's assistant she might be, and she's detracting the whole time with this lovely, vibrantly colored wrist.
Oh, they have a very deep meaning. The one is black and white, and the other one is very colorful. It's all, it's the past. It's one day I might explain it all. Yeah, they mean a lot. They mean a lot.
Good.
People often say, how can you garden with your braces? But they just part of me,
Yeah.
just a bit of
Your heart.
And yeah, it's been an absolute joy. The Money Saving Gardener is released tomorrow from when this podcast goes out, and everyone can go and get it in their local bookshop and gift it and spread the joy of propagation and saving money.
And it really is the most sensational book to give as a gift, because it's the kind of book that just keeps on giving.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we will meet face to face at some point. I would love
I'm sure
that.
we will, Anya. You're so lovely. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Until next time, happy gardening, everybody.
Definitely.
Happy gardening,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
connected. Oh, I think we might be able to hear you now.
I can hear you now.
Yay.
Oh, and now he's frozen. I swear, Anya, it's not normally like this. You're about to be going to a room you weren't supposed to be in, so I hope you're not about to freeze your whatever's off. Well, now we've got 2 Allens. This is exciting. I might try and remove this Allen. Remove Allen. Remove one Allen and bring back this Allen.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, hello, Ian. Oh, you've gone again.
Hey. Hello.
Oh, I love this background too.
Oh, you can see his whole house.
Oh my God, I can't see. Oh yeah.
Oh, there we go. We're both trying to adjust ourselves so we're a little bit matching. Look at that.
Behind you under your.
Oh, we had such brilliant internet for like 3 minutes.
Oh, there she is. Oh,
Another
is that a
location.
different jumper?
No, it's the same jumper.
I'd love if you
Oh.
changed outfit as well. That'd be good.
Yes.
Just how much time do you think I've got?